Before we dive into today's deeply emotional and intense story, I want to pause for just a moment. Over 90% of people who watch our videos aren't subscribed. If stories like this move you, make you think, or stay with you long after the video ends, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And if at any point this story grips your heart, don't forget to like the video. It truly helps more than you know. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Clara. I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for just over 14 years. 14 years sounds like a long time when you say it out loud. Long enough to build memories. Long enough to raise children. Long enough to believe you truly know the person sleeping beside you at night. But sometimes, the length of time doesn't reflect the depth of connection. Daniel and I met in college. You know, the kind of story people love to romanticize. The kind that comes up at reunions when someone raises a glass and smiles nostalgically. He was charismatic even then. Confident. Quick with words. Ambitious in a way that made people lean in when he spoke. He always seemed to know exactly where he was headed. I was different. Quieter. More observant. I liked stability. I liked listening more than speaking. While Daniel dreamed big and loud, I dreamed small and safe. Somehow, at the time, it felt like we balanced each other perfectly. We married young. I was 23. Daniel was 25. Looking back now, I wonder if we were brave, or just unaware of how much life still had waiting for us. Our early years together were messy in the way young love often is. Rented apartments with thin walls. Student loans that felt suffocating. Cheap dinners, ramen noodles, burned toast, overcooked pasta. Arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes or pay the electric bill. But through all of that, I believed we loved each other deeply. Or maybe I believed in the idea of us. As time passed, life moved forward the way it always does. Quietly, relentlessly. By our mid-30s, everything looked successful from the outside. Daniel had carved out a solid career in finance. Promotions came. Business trips became frequent. His phone never stopped buzzing. And me? I stepped away from my career to raise our children. Our daughter Leia and our son James. At first, I told myself it was the right decision. The noble one. I convinced myself that being present for every milestone, every scraped knee, every bedtime story was worth more than any paycheck or professional title. And maybe it was. But somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I began disappearing. Not physically, but emotionally. My days blurred together into routines that never seemed to end. Early mornings. Packed lunches. School drop-offs. Grocery lists scribbled on scraps of paper. Meal prep. Laundry. Homework. Late nights waiting for Daniel to come home. Or not. Between Daniel's board meetings and business trips, we stopped talking about anything meaningful. Conversations turned into updates. Schedules. Reminders. Logistics. Hugs became habitual. Intimacy faded quietly, replaced by exhaustion and silence. I didn't blame him entirely. Distance doesn't grow overnight. It grows slowly, fed by neglect, distraction, and the assumption that love can survive without attention. What hurt the most wasn't the absence of romance. It was how unseen I felt. Then last spring, something changed. Something I never expected. That was when Aiden moved back next door. He'd grown up 2 houses down, the only child of the Lilies, who had been our neighbors for as long as I could remember. I remembered him as a skinny, energetic kid who was always kicking a soccer ball or racing bikes down the street with a group of boys. When he turned 18, he left for college in California. And then life happened. Years passed. We barely heard his name. Until his mother passed away. That loss brought him back home. 23 years old, freshly graduated, and now caring for his father, whose health had been declining. The first time I saw him again, I almost didn't recognize him. He was unloading boxes from a U-Haul truck while I trimmed the hedges in our front yard. Taller, broader, carrying himself with that effortless confidence people often have in their early 20s. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Mrs. Owens?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "You're absolutely not allowed to call me that," I said. "It makes me sound ancient." He grinned. "Sophie, Clara." And just like that, something small shifted. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just a moment. Over the next few weeks, I began seeing him more often. He mowed his father's lawn, walked their dog, sat on the porch reading or talking on the phone. We exchanged polite neighbor conversations. Weather, trash pickup delays, small complaints about the heat, ordinary things. But then slowly, our conversations started lasting longer. One afternoon, I was struggling with a broken sprinkler in the backyard. Daniel was away, as usual, and I didn't want to call a plumber for something that felt so minor. Aiden noticed from his porch. "Need help?" he asked. I hesitated. Pride is a strange thing. But eventually, I nodded. "It's embarrassing," I admitted. "I've been fighting with this thing for 20 minutes. He crouched beside me, focused and patient, adjusting the pipe with ease. Within minutes, the sprinkler sputtered back to life. "There," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "Not so hard." "Easy for you to say," I laughed. That moment didn't feel significant at the time. But it was the beginning. From then on, he waved whenever he saw me. He lingered when we talked. He asked how I was doing, and waited for the answer. Not out of politeness. Out of interest. And I found myself responding the same way. I started looking forward to seeing him. I brought over baked goods for his dad. I glanced toward their porch when I went for walks. I told myself it wasn't romantic. Just kindness. Just attention. Just someone noticing me again. But deep down, something else was waking up. As the days of midsummer faded into early autumn, I realized I was looking forward to small moments with Aiden more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't love. Not yet, or at least, I told myself it wasn't. It was the first time in years that someone looked at me and seemed to really see me. One late afternoon, the kids were at a friend's house. I was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, reading a book I barely paid attention to. The air was warm, but not oppressive, carrying that soft hum of summer leaving the neighborhood. Aiden appeared at the gate, holding a folder. "Hey," he said, his voice casual, but there was something earnest in the way he looked at me. "Mind if I pick your brain about something?" I blinked. "About?" He explained that he was applying to graduate schools and wanted feedback on his personal statement. My chest tightened, not because of the request, but because he remembered my teaching background. Remembered I used to teach English. We sat there for over an hour. He read passages aloud. I suggested alternatives. He asked questions. He didn't just nod politely, he engaged. Every word, every pause made me feel like my mind mattered again. At some point he leaned back, smiled faintly, and said, "You should be doing this, Clara. Teaching. You're too smart to have stepped away completely." I froze. Not because of the compliment. Because of the way he said it. Unfiltered, genuine, without pity. It was as though he saw through the dust that had settled on my life, into the woman I had stopped noticing myself to become. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying his voice, the intensity of his focus, the rare way someone made me feel seen. Over the following weeks, our interactions increased, almost imperceptibly. He'd stop by with his dog, bring over a book he thought I'd like, ask about my garden. Simple things, innocent things. But the emotional closeness grew, and with it a quiet tension I couldn't shake. We never crossed any physical boundaries. He never touched me, never said anything inappropriate. And yet, something unspoken thrummed in the space between us. One late summer evening, as the sun cast long golden streaks over my backyard, he said quietly, "You seem lonely sometimes." I blinked, startled. What do you mean?" I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. He looked at me, not accusing, not prying, just observing. "You deserve more than just being someone's background character," he said softly. Those words lingered like smoke in the air. I felt them in my chest, in my limbs, in the tiny, overlooked corners of myself I'd ignored for years. I began questioning everything. Was this the life I had chosen? Or the life I had settled for? At home, Daniel remained mostly oblivious. Work consumed him. Meetings, calls, emails, deadlines, occasional apologies for coming home late, but nothing more. He asked if I was okay, always in passing, always distracted. always a little too tired to notice. Aiden, on the other hand, noticed me. He didn't just see my physical presence. He acknowledged my emotions, my thoughts, my existence beyond the routines and domestic obligations. And I didn't know what I was doing. Not really. I wasn't planning to leave. I wasn't scheming to betray. I was just lost. And in that space of uncertainty, he made me feel found. But even as that joy quietly settled around me, I knew I was walking a tightrope. One misstep, and everything could shatter. The next weeks became a quiet kind of tension. I deliberately pulled back, creating distance. I told myself it was for the best, for clarity, for my marriage, for my children. I thought if I focused on my family, if I buried my feelings, they would fade like morning fog under sunlight. But emotions don't obey logic. Space didn't erase connection. It magnified it. Aiden respected my distance. He didn't push. His waves became shorter. His smiles smaller. But whenever our eyes met across the fence, there was a silent understanding that neither of us could ignore. Meanwhile, Daniel continued in his routine. Late nights. Early mornings. Sleeping in the guest room. Claiming back pain or restless sleep. We had grown so used to the distance between us that it almost felt normal. Except it wasn't. Inside, I was unraveling. The kids remained blissfully unaware. Leia and James were wrapped in their own worlds. Soccer practice, piano lessons, homework, friends. I kept appearances. I packed lunches. I helped with school projects. Cheered from the sidelines. Smiled at family gatherings. Laughed when I had to. But inside I felt hollow. One night, Daniel came home unusually late, almost midnight. I was on the couch, half reading a book I hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. My thoughts had wandered far beyond the story. He dropped his keys on the counter. Sorry, long day. I nodded, barely. You've had a lot of those lately. He slumped into a chair, rubbing his eyes. I know. The new clients, it's relentless. Nonstop. We sat in silence. A heavy, almost physical distance settled between us. Do you ever feel like we're just roommates? I asked softly. His eyes widened. What? Like coexisting? Going through the motions? Yes, I said. Not talking. Not connecting. Just surviving. He sighed, pacing. And what exactly do you want me to say? That I'm sorry for being tired? That I should quit my job and sit on the porch all day with you? It wasn't cruelty that stung. It was dismissal. Indifference masquerading as honesty. I replied quietly, carefully. No. I just want to feel like you see me. For a moment, his expression faltered, between guilt and defensiveness. But instead of responding, he walked out. That night, lying awake in the dark, I thought of Aiden. Of how he listened. Really listened. Of how he made me feel visible. Not just background noise in someone else's life. And I felt the truth pressing in. My heart was shifting. Slowly, imperceptibly, but unmistakably. The days that followed were a storm of quiet confusion. I tried to avoid Aiden again. But this time, it felt impossible. Our connection was no longer casual. It was real, potent, undeniable. Trying to bury it only made it stronger. He never said the wrong thing. He never acted inappropriately. Yet everything about our relationship felt like a taut thread stretched so tight it could snap at any moment. One afternoon, I found a book on my porch, a novel we'd discussed during a conversation weeks before. Inside a note. For when the world gets too loud, you deserve quiet. I sat there, the book in my lap, feeling the walls around my heart crumble faster than I could rebuild them. I started writing in my journal again, a habit abandoned since college. I poured everything onto the pages, confusion, guilt, longing, fear. The life I thought I wanted versus the life I had built. And through it all, one truth emerged. I was emotionally entangled with someone who wasn't my husband. I hadn't physically cheated, but in every other way that mattered. I had stepped outside the boundaries of my marriage. Dinner one night highlighted the distance in a painful way. The kids were with their grandparents. A rare moment to reconnect with Daniel. Instead, we ate in near silence. Two separate worlds, divided by a table. Silverware clinking. Breaths measured. Words unspoken. I caught sight of Aiden walking his dog outside under the streetlights. Our eyes met. And in that instant I felt everything. The possibility, the guilt, the ache for a life that might never belong to me. I turned away, heart pounding, knuckles white against the countertop. I had a choice to make. And whatever came next would be deliberate.